Live. Hi, everybody. Welcome today to our webinar. We are so excited to have you here. We're going to be sharing some really exciting stuff, and I encourage everybody to stick around through the end of the webinar where we have some really special offers for you guys from all of us here at Sellers Funding, Maximizing E-commerce, and Global E-commerce Experts. So it's going to be worth the wait on top of the amazing content. Let me introduce myself. My name is Amanda Hanono. I am the business manager here at Sellers Funding. With us today, we have Leonardo Felisberto, the global head of partnerships at Sellers Funding. We have Kevin Sanderson, the founder of Maximizing E-commerce, and we have Ricky Hooker, the general manager at Global E-commerce Experts. Sellers Funding is a digital financial platform that empowers the growth for e-commerce businesses, as I'm sure you guys know. Kevin Sanderson and his team help successful 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers grow their sales by expanding into Amazon's international marketplaces. And then also, Global E-commerce Experts is a one-stop shop for e-commerce businesses to go into Europe and the UK. Ricky has 20 years of international trade expansion experience that provides turnkey solutions to adding the lucrative European markets to your selling portfolio. Lots of good stuff. Our guys know everything that you need to know today, so it's going to be great. So I'd like to jump in and go right ahead and introduce our topic for today. We're unlocking growth through international expansion. Insider growth tips from our experts who we just introduced, and they have successfully scaled businesses across borders. So this is exactly who we need here today. So what are we going to cover? Increase conversions and customer reach, launch in a new region as fast as 14 days, choosing the marketplace, the markets that are best for the expansion, and preserving margins by knowing costs up front. All right, so exciting stuff. Let's jump right in. What is the benefit of selling products into new markets? Kevin, take it away.
Yeah, so I was recently, a couple months back, my family went to the Blue Ridge Mountains in northern Georgia. And I came up with this idea of kind of took some pictures of a waterfall. And I'm calling this the waterfall principle because I think it fits with selling internationally. So if you see that stream there on the left-hand side, think of that stream as your cash flow. Well, if you go upstream, that money is coming from somewhere. And so your money, your cash flow, your profits, all that's coming from somewhere. So if you look in the picture there on the right, there's a larger waterfall, which would be your Amazon US sales. And then there just happened to be at this place 2 waterfalls. And that is very, I think, metaphorical of if you're selling internationally, it's like having a second waterfall. So if you look at that, you can just imagine, would you rather have 1 waterfall or 2 waterfalls flowing cash into your stream? And so I think selling internationally can act as your second waterfall to bring you more cash and sales and profit into your business to help you expand.
That's amazing. And also pretty convenient that your vacation led us to
I
this epiphany,
know.
right?
It totally did. I was like, well, this is kind of cool. I like this general concept. I need to travel more often. Maybe I come up with other things like
You'll be able to write a book
that's
by
right.
the end of it.
I know, maybe one day.
So we're going to move on and talking about increasing conversions and customer reach. Ricky, I think this is a good area for you to jump in.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you're on this webinar, you're either curious or you're already in the place that your online business is successful to some degree, perhaps you want it to be more successful. The easiest way of tapping into growing your business is just to add access to more people who are going to buy the goods that you sell. So fundamentally, adding market capacity. The first route, would certainly from GE's advice point, is to access Europe and the European Union, or the UK and the European Union in particular. Those two things are separate, of course, because a couple of years ago, the UK left what was the European Union. It didn't leave Europe. That would have been quite tricky from a geographic perspective, but we certainly left the European Union, which was a little bit like California leaving the United States. In essence, what you're looking at here is 520 million people, of which you can read the stats there. There's a whole pile of online shoppers. 94% of UK buyers will shop online. 86% of German buyers will shop online. These numbers haven't been adjusted for post-pandemic when things only got better in our favor, but we are looking at a $717 billion industry. And that compares to circa 800 billion in the US. So what we're saying is, if you want to, in round terms, double your business, the first port of call is to look to Europe. The second thing, of course, is that you get a quick and easy access to turnover, that second river that Kevin was mentioning there. And without actually doing anything different. You haven't got to source any additional products. Maybe you want to source some maybe you'll have to source some more, but you've got an easy access, especially via the UK, to a turnkey ready market that wants to buy your goods.
It's great.
Those are great points, Ricky. And just to quickly chime in as well, and to bring the seller into this conversation. So actually a few days ago, I asked our data team to pull some stats for me, and of our existing client base, so of our active clients, about 15% of our clients sell in 2 or more marketplaces. Now, the qualifying criteria for that is that at least 10% of each marketplace had to be at least 10% of their total sales, right? Coming from each respective marketplace. So that's statistic number 1. But the more interesting point that came from this analytics that we did is that this subset of clients actually had a year-over-year growth rate of almost 36% higher than clients that are selling in only one marketplace. So really powerful stuff.
That's incredible. And it makes all the sense in the world, you know. We have access to all this technology and all these resources that make the world so much smaller. So why not take advantage of it, right?
Right. Add that second waterfall.
Exactly. There it is.
Yes.
Travel the world, guys. You'll learn
Yes.
so many things. So write a book. So we're going to jump in. And the next question at the table here is, how easy is it to sell into another region? Ricky, I'm going to pick on you again. We're talking here about launching in a new region as fast as 14 days. So if this is a possibility, there has to be some simplicity to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, depending on on where you're going to go, there's various different complexities of what you're going to be doing. But fundamentally, you know, you're not in Kansas anymore. You're going to have to apply to, and you're going to have to adhere to the regulations and the laws that are fundamental to that particular country. It's easiest, of course, if you're starting out afresh, to begin with native speaking countries. Start with Canada. Maybe move to the UK, then move quickly on to the to the EU market after that. The reason being, you can speak the language, slightly more easier to navigate your way through the bureaucracy of what's required. But GE's developed a very steadfast and well-trodden. We've grown thousands of businesses over the last period from the US and elsewhere into the UK and the EU. We've done this through a very well-trodden process of researching the market, making sure that your products are suitable for overseas sale. Most products that sell well online in the United States are suitable across the world. If you were selling, I don't know, cowboy boots, stars and stripes flag, something particularly native, maybe you might want to think about increasing your portfolio. But fundamentally, the types of things that are popular online to be sold in your home market will likely, sweeping statement, will likely be suitable for sale in the UK and the EU. Beyond that, you need to get compliant. And we'll talk about the more detail about that. You need to get launched, which means getting your stuff into the country, clearing it through customs, getting all the paperwork sorted. You then need to house it somewhere. You need to put it into some kind of third-party logistics facility, or straight into FBA, into Amazon, if that's the route that you choose. You then just start promoting it, be that on an online sales channel, on your own website, both potentially. And beyond there, you need to work hard to grow it in the same way as you do at home. Some of the work that you're doing at home will, of course, make a difference in those markets, but you have to realize that even if you're selling on Amazon or you're selling on eBay, you're likely to find that you'll need to dedicate some time and resource, or indeed subcontract that to an agency if you can, to be able to make that growth happen in those other countries. But there's plenty of potential when you go about doing that.
That's great. I mean, it's a lot of good info. So let's move on. There are
Yeah, this is
steps to this process, right?
Yeah, this is a slightly deeper dive into that last slide of, the actual steps. And GE talks about expanding to Europe in 14 days. And it is a tried and tested method. Most sellers don't do it that quick because it requires some workarounds. But if there was a specific reason that you wanted to grow onto the UK and EU marketplace, it can be done in as little as 2 weeks. This is not a long, drawn out, protracted affair. Some elements take slightly longer, put that as a caveat, but you can certainly be trading very, very quickly. I talked a little bit about that feasibility study that both you and perhaps native Brit or European can do on your behalf. You might choose to be sourcing your products from elsewhere. Much of the products are sold online, comes from outside of the US and is imported in. So of course you can then ascertain whether it's better to ship your goods from the point of purchase directly into the UK and the EU. And I use those terms separately because of course you can't ship directly into one and move them around like you can in the United States, because the UK is separate from there. So you need to send some goods into the UK and some goods into the EU separately. The goods that are in Europe are free and clear to move around all of the European EU countries without any further ado. But what you don't want to do is pay tax and duty into both of those individually. With regard to product sourcing, you might decide that you'll source your products from elsewhere. Some products you might find are cheaper, and from a logistical point of view, are easier to source from inside the European Union. There's certain countries that can produce very high quality, very low cost equipment that might match or exceed the quality and specification that you already have. It's not by any means the only way of where you have it from, where it comes from originally. Second step is your compliance. These are the legal things. You've got to tick these pieces off. These are the kind of bureaucratic items that you'll know from at home, but these are completely different. The law and regulations are completely different. We'll touch a little bit on taxes later on, but in essence, you need to get your products compliant. That's mainly your labels. Take, for instance, if you have a product that has ingredients on it, those ingredients need to be shown in metric numbers, not imperial numbers. So they can't be shown, and they might have to have, safety certification, things like that, which is specific to the UK and the EU. That's a simple thing to have checked. It's a service we provide at GE. You have your label checked, make recommendations on the conversion, and you can either over-label your goods or you can have that done at source. The address and responsible person service it means that there's an address inside the UK and or the EU that is the kind of go-to place in the event that any kind of trading body or official regulatory body wanted to check up or scrutinize your products or have some place to come back to. Amazon, of course, demands label compliance, tax compliance, and a responsible person or address service for most products. EPR is the environmental permitting regulations. This is a license that you have to show that you've taken certain environmental steps with regard to packaging, lithium-ion batteries, stuff like that. Not relevant to all sellers, not relevant to trading in all countries, but you have to make sure that you're going to go and do that. So you need to take advice on that on that front. Barcodes and GTIDs. Unfortunately, not all US barcodes will be valid in the UK and the EU, so you need to check your barcodes. And finally, of course, your intellectual property and your trademarks, you might decide that those things need to be extended to the UK and the EU markets if you're not protected outside of your home country. So these things take a few weeks to get sorted out. There's some forms to fill in, there's some applications to be made, there's generally some costs involved. And once you've done those, depending on where you're going to go and sell, those things are done and dusted. Maybe an annual fee for some compliance. Once those things are out the way, you can start shipping your goods. You can get them in a container. You can ship them LCL, less than container load. You can air freight them directly into Amazon FBA. Plenty of different options there. You can clear them through customs using your tax registration numbers that you've just got in your compliance phase. And at that time, you'll be busy sorting out payments. Do you want to use some kind of payment gateway? You need to trade in native currencies. So you're going to start needing to work in multiple currencies, euros and sterling. How are you effectively going to get that money back into US dollars to put food on your table at home? There's various different platforms and payment gateway providers that do a really great job of doing that. It's very low cost nowadays. That's a big thing to get sorted out early on, to understand how to extract your cash. You've got to choose a platform. This is an important piece. It's important because Amazon is the dominant marketplace in the United States and in most capacity in the UK and in Germany, but elsewhere across Europe, it most certainly isn't. You certainly do need to make sure that you're able to expand to multiple marketplaces. A multiple marketplace approach is hugely important in the EU. It's not just about Amazon, although it's certainly a good starting point if you're a seller at home. Finally, of course, and here's the big piece, you've got multiple languages here. You've got significant multiple languages, so you need to make some choices as to which languages you translate your listing, your A+ content, your photographs, all of those types of things will need to be translated. And that also includes, of course, any documents, instructions, safety records, and things which go with the product themselves. So there'll be a fair amount of translation to be done. You can work your way through these processes. You'll already have things in UK, in English. You'll need to transfer things into French and German to begin with. But any country in the EU that you're going to sell in, you will need to provide safety information as a minimum in that native currency, native language. And importantly, if you want to sell with any volume, you've got to translate.
That's good advice, a lot of good advice. And in these first 3 steps, correct me if I'm wrong, Ricky, but it sounds like the compliance step is really going to be the most time intensive, making sure that all these compliance needs are met to make sure that when you start selling, you have your bases covered. Are some of these steps in the compliance area things that can be, researched and understood in advance to help move this process along once a decision is made?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you don't have to have finished step 2 before you begin step 3. You don't have to have done all those things. Once you've got a VAT number for a tax compliance number, you can actually start shipping your goods. And then whilst those things are chucking across the ocean or in the air, however they're coming into the UK, you can be sorting out, the responsible person, the address service to update your Seller Central if you're an Amazon seller. You can be checking out, making some other applications and things. So it doesn't actually all have to happen in this order. To cram it into 14 days, you're going to need to air freight stuff because ships don't move that quick. And secondly, you're going to need to find some workarounds. So we're not going to touch on those workarounds to get it that tight on this session. But actually, Amanda, it's not that complicated because it's generally speaking, it's one set of information if you go to a one-stop shop. Sure. You could go to multiple different places for your tax, your product compliance, your responsible person, your EPR. GE happens to do that all under one roof, and we'll talk about that later on if we're able to and we've got time. But fundamentally, you once you've done the research on step 1, you can get the ball rolling and start shipping your goods. That's
great. So moving on, we have a few more steps here.
Yeah, I'll whistle through the last the last parts. These are some of the most important pieces. But once your goods have landed into the UK in the EU, you need a trusted partner who will store and fulfill your goods for you, take back the returns, rework them as required, and you'll need a separate facility in the UK in the EU. It's super important to have a great relationship with your 3PL. These organizations are generally taking a whole bunch of your stock, possibly your child's inheritance, and they're going to take that stock off you, and you need to trust them that they're going to do a good job. What that means is that they need to understand what's required from your goods, and you need to be entirely educated as to the processes and systems of that third-party logistics business, so that what you put in, what you present them, the information you give them, the requests that you give them are commensurate with their own systems, so that they can do a good job pushing things out in the other direction. But fundamentally, fulfillment means pick and pack. If you are, say, a merchant fulfilled seller, it could mean direct POs directly from Amazon. If you're a vendor seller, it could mean a link to your Shopify or your WooCommerce website, and orders will come straight through and they'll get sent out individually. Or it might be cartons, pallets into FBA in various different places around the UK and Europe. So obviously you imagine that's all software driven. So when the orders come through into Seller Central, they're automatically fulfilled. So you can concentrate on your business over here in the US or wherever you are in the world, knowing that your goods are being fulfilled and looked after in overseas markets. And of course, if things go wrong, if they need to be reworked, if they need to be returned, then the same facilities need to work in the opposite direction. Beyond that, you need to start getting busy with promoting, because if you're taking Amazon in particular, Amazon in the UK, Amazon in France, and Amazon in Germany, they're separate entities. Ostensibly the same Seller or Vendor Central platform that you're going to be working from, but the features and benefits and PPC and the vouchers and the deals and things you can be doing, you'll need to be replicating those across each of those different platforms. So you're adding workflow. You might need to cater for the resource for that, but don't forget, at any one given time, you are doubling your market. We'd always recommend, beyond e-commerce platform, that of course you're promoting your own sales through a website. That's super important, because you get to keep the data of the people that you're selling to. And if they like your product, they're more than likely to come back. So it's really important, if you've got your own Shopify or WooCommerce or whatever based website at home, that you replicate that in native language, get it translated, and have all of the features and benefits that you have on your home website internationally. Really important. Finally, growth means more platforms. Growth means more marketplaces. It means more language translations. It's a rinse and repeat process of adding your goods onto more marketplaces. Luckily, nowadays there's software to be able to replicate your listings and to push them out to different platforms. It's a relatively simple approach once you've done those translations. More countries, more geographic regions, and to keep building your market and building your capacity to sell. You know what you're good at. You've chosen a good product. You know how to sell it. You just need to put it in front of as many people as possible. And there's the formula. We put exit on the end there because, of course, there's an important point that at some point you're going to want to leave your business. So you're going to want to sell that to somebody to continue it on, and exit, or you might do. Putting together a strong international strategy is crucial for your appeal to somebody who would want to buy your online business towards the end. So that's really the 7 steps. And Amanda, if you flick to the next slide, you can see kind of all the last pieces of what that looks like, and how the pathway kind of unravels. So I think I've touched on all of these things in here, but using the kind of central spine of the expansion pathway with all the pieces that go on there. If you touch on all of the pieces in this infographic, and you've got a market research product which sells, you will grow your business without any shadow of a doubt. I think that gives a relatively comprehensive run through of the kind of fundamental pieces that you'll need to do, with hurdles along the way, of course.
Sure.
A question for you, Ricky. Sorry to jump in, Amanda. Going back to the previous slide, step 6, the own website. In your experience, just curious, are there any platforms that you think perform better or are more user friendly than others in terms of you going international with your Shopify, BigCommerce, WooCommerce, whatever it may be?
Well, I think it will entirely depend on where you're coming from the beginning. You certainly wouldn't want to all of the major product selling tools that are available in your home country will be compatible with the UK and in the EU. Shopify, of course, is very popular. WooCommerce is very popular. WordPress based platforms like Dr. Tech, for instance, is a big one that's growing. We recommend to our clients a lot here, mainly because it's a very quick and simple route to accessing. But fundamentally, if you've got a Shopify Plus website at home, you're probably going to want to use a Shopify Plus website, or to expand your existing site, Shopify Plus will allow you to extend that over. So use what you've got initially, and all of the major players will work well on the UK and the EU markets.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Great.
Awesome. Thanks, Ricky. And, while we're asking questions, I wanted to address all of our viewers right now and remind everybody we have a chat open. And actually, I should have introduced this in the beginning of the chat, but might as well talk about it now. We encourage everybody to ask questions. We're here for you guys. So use the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. Ask any questions you have to Ricky, to Leo, to Kevin. And we'll try our best to address them all. But some other things that you can find in the chat are some general information about each of our companies, access to our FAQs, access to our social media, so should you want to contact any of us directly. But those resources are there for you. They'll be there throughout the webinar, so feel free to hop in there and take a look, use that chat, talk to us, and with that, we can move on. So we talked about how, in simple terms, how it can be easy to launch in a new market, but there has to be some challenges as well. So what are some of those challenges, right?
Yeah, so I can touch on this. So in addition to helping people expand internationally, I'm a seller myself. And so I've lived through a lot of this stuff. I was just chatting with some folks the other day about how Amazon makes it sound very plug and play, which it kind of is when you think about it from a high level of, when else in history has it been this easy to sell your stuff in other marketplaces in countries around the world, and you're still doing it from your living room, basically. And so that's great, but there's still some hurdles we have to jump through on the front end. But once you get to the other side, everything kind of runs pretty much like it does on Amazon in the US. But if you've been on Amazon for any length of time, there's going to be some challenges with things like catalogs and things like that. So really, we point this out not to say like, oh my gosh, this is going to be this, huge issue that's going to prevent me from selling internationally. But these are things you can get through. And once you're on the other side, then just know other people have done this too. And you're going to get that second waterfall. You're going to get the additional sales. And, as Leo had pointed out, like you're getting the opportunity for more growth and faster growth really than a lot of your competition. So this could be your competitive edge. So think of it this way. You might have some of these catalog issues. These are screenshots of things I've dealt with actual clients, but you can get through these things. Some of them, it takes a little bit of, I hate to use the word brute force, and just keep putting in new support cases with Amazon. You might have to go through brand registry, things of that nature, but you can get through these things. And on the other side, you're going to get sales. Now, the good thing is the more compliance stuff there is, the more challenges like this you face, a lot of your competition will give up along the way. So you're giving yourself a competitive edge by going through some of these things. And on the other side, it really is, I hate to oversimplify things, but if you understand how Amazon in the US works, there might just be a money symbol looks different once you're up and running. I know it's not that simple, but a lot of times we overcomplicate things in our head. So we bring up the challenges because we don't want to sugarcoat it and make you think like, oh, it's just going to be, plug and play and you're done. You are going to face some challenges along the way, but they're not insurmountable. And that will give you the ability to really take things to a new level in your business.
We always tell our clients that their goal done correctly should be to add 80% of their US sales into their business. So to increase their business by 80% by growing into the UK and the EU market. So wherever the challenges come, you won't be the first person to have it. There's going to be someone that can help you and advise you and guide you through those points. But wherever there's a degree of frustration, you've got to not forget the end point of, I can add 80% to my top line here. And there's the overarching goal.
at the end, it's worth the reward. And, as business owners, no one is, unaware of the challenges and difficulties that happen. It's not always a walk in the park. But I like the point, Kevin, you made that it's really about how bad you want it and getting that competitive edge by just seeing yourself through this process. Because, as Ricky just said, at the end, it's worth it, right? The business definitely flourishes in result.
Yeah. And one thing just to kind of, tag on that point a little more is you also have to compare your potential options. And
Sure.
so potentially your other option is maybe sell on Walmart in the US. I sell on Walmart in the US. I don't disparage selling in Walmart in the US, but without fail, I've met only one person. Now someone's going to come up to me afterwards and say that they're doing a whole lot more in, let's say Amazon in Canada or Amazon in the UK than they're making on Walmart in the US. And if you've sold on Walmart, you're learning a new set of terms of service, a new set of customer expectations, a new algorithm, a new way of writing your listings. Everything's going to be new and different. And it's not going to be as simple as plug and play either. So which is going to get you the best result of, return on time invested to get launched, and which one's going to get you is going to be something you're going to also understand once you're up and running.
Great. And we actually had a question come into the chat from Kyle Wood. Kyle says, hi, we're based in the UK and we're interested in expanding online offerings across Europe. If we were to start with Amazon as our initial online store, would we need to initially start with Amazon UK and then expand to Amazon Germany and also Amazon US if trading the other way across the pond, or simply set up an account with Amazon target country?
Well, if you're already selling on Amazon in the UK, you will already have an account with Amazon in the UK. And if you then want to expand into other countries in the EU initially, then yes, in effect, within Seller Central for the UK, you can turn on either the Pan-European program, or you can, I'm assuming, Kyle, that you're using Seller Central. You're an FBA client. If that's the case, you can turn on other countries within Seller Central, which gives you the capacity to access those countries. You don't need a separate account in those countries at all. The US side is slightly different, but in essence, you can do all of that through one account.
Thank you, Ricky. Kyle, I hope that answered your question. And feel free to drop any other questions you guys may have throughout. So we just covered some of the challenges that you may face. And then next, love to talk about how to choose really what market to expand to next. Kevin, I'm going to pick on you first.
Oh, okay, good. So I think for a lot of sellers in the US, going to Canada is a really good one. I agree with what Ricky said earlier about sticking with the language Now, once you start getting into, let's say you go from Florida, where Amanda and I live, and you go to other parts of the country, people might have different words they use to describe some of the same things. Now, when you get into other countries, that changes a little bit as well. Canada is going to be the most similar to the US in general when it comes to those type of things. And the way their sales tax system works is most similar to how things work in the US, but it also helps to prepare you for how it would work in Europe as well. So it's kind of like a good bridge between. And the Canadian government, I tend to find to be one of the simplest to work with for registrations and whatnot. And that also gives you the confidence to go into, I think, UK next, and then to the rest of the EU. That's my personal opinion as far as, going back to the concept of return on time invested on the front end, because oftentimes people are also deciding like, hey, I keep getting emails every day about going into Saudi Arabia or UAE or Turkey or whatnot, but you might not have the customer base, or Amazon might not have the customer base to really support a lot of sellers over there. So you might dominate the first page, but what are you dominating type of thing. So just some of my personal opinion on kind of deciding where to go to next.
Kevin, thank you. And Ricky, how about you? Any other insight there?
Yeah, I mean, you're entering into a market space which is becoming increasingly popular. 2,000 sellers a day is quite an incredible statistic. I think what you'll need, that all comes back to your feasibility in terms of looking at, how congested is the market for the particular products that you want to be selling? How particular is how congested is the market in other countries? You've got to bear in mind that you're on different marketplaces in different countries. If you're looking, you could do a feasibility study for France and for Germany separate to the UK, for instance, which is, I guess, what Kevin's touching on. If you were thinking about putting your products on Amazon in the UAE or in Poland, for instance, you might find that the traffic is, or the SKUs are less congested in terms of availability, but you need to offset that, and some bits on that on the next slide, I think, Amanda, with the scale of the opportunity.
So when we move on to the next slide, we're actually going to dive into costs of expanding, right? So
yeah, I think we're going to touch on them. Yeah. I think the point of this of things coming up was in this one here is just in terms of preparing correctly for new markets as a completely different geographic regions, from a business owner's perspective, a completely different set of below the line costs, and actually quite a lot of above the line costs, because you've got very different situations in terms of compliance costs, of tax costs, of routes of trading. We'll touch on tax later, but in the UK and the EU, the tax is included in the price rather than added at the end. So you need to be you certainly need to do your research before any of this stuff happens. But I'm going to say it one more time: the opportunity is huge once you do so.
Leo, do you have anything to add on the point of, considering markets to expand to?
Yeah, I think just to echo on what both Ricky and Kevin had said, I think, for your expanding into your next marketplace, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, right? I think about it from our perspective, Sellers Funding, and the journey that we took, right? So we are a US-based company, and then shortly thereafter, we established ourselves in the UK, Canada, in Europe, right? And so why these three markets specifically? Low barriers to entry for us first, but then I think even more important than that is when we were going through the cost benefit analysis, right, of expanding into new regions, just looking at the market size, the opportunity itself, right? So these tend to be the largest economies, right? And therefore it's going to have a much larger consumer market, right, for you to target. And going back to what Kevin had said before, I think sometimes folks may try to get a little too creative, right, and a little too clever, where you're going to have a big piece of a very small pie, or maybe you have a smaller piece of a very big pie, right? So you just have to kind of play around with the numbers, see what the ROI is, and what makes sense, as Ricky had said, for your particular business, right, and the products that you sell.
Great. So we have a few comments and questions coming into the chat right now, so forgive me while I take a look here. Andrew makes a comment. And I mean, we talked about it, but I think it's worth addressing again that, it is possible to launch in 14 days into new markets, but we know that likely it may take longer, or it's going to deviate from this course. It's on a case-by-case basis. Every business is different. So he's just pointing out that, he has found some difficulty in his business expanding through some of the VAT and compliance situations. But it will vary on a case-by-case basis. Not to say that that won't happen, but to say that it's certainly possible to launch into new markets in a short time. Steve asks a question. Germany is no longer issuing EORI. My understanding is you can bring goods through NL. Forgive me, I don't know what some of these acronyms are, but I'm sure you guys do, or I hope you guys do.
Yeah, no, we got you.
Okay.
We're there.
Through NL. Is this a good approach, or are there any better ways of sending goods to Amazon, Germany, FBA?
Shall I do this one, Kevin? I think
Go for it.
say D is of course Germany, and the EORI number is the tax originating number. That's basically your kind of tax reference number for your business that comes with your tax registration. Now, in the EU, you can register, you can have a tax registration in any country in the EU, and you can use that then to import your goods anywhere into the European Union, because in effect, a European citizen can trade, or a European business operator can trade anywhere in that area. So we would always recommend that you import your goods via the Netherlands. Reason being, it's the least complicated, congested, and bureaucratically tricky area of Europe to bring your goods in, and as you know, and is readily available. It's the gateway to Europe. That's an opinion rather than a statement. It's the gateway to Europe in terms of bringing your goods in. You can use an EORI number from anywhere in the European Union, apart from the UK. You need an EORI number for the UK separately. That is a good approach, Steve. If you want to be moving your goods into Germany, into German FBA, we'd very much recommend that you bring those goods into the Netherlands. You know, one of Amazon's largest fulfillment centers is just a few hours drive by road from the port that they'll arrive with in the Netherlands. So yeah, absolutely would recommend that you bring those goods. If they're coming by sea, if you're air freighting, of course, you'll want to move those directly into Germany, but then you need to import them into Germany, which tends to be, conversely, tends to be the most complicated and bureaucratically tricky area to put them in, but is the largest Amazon market in the EU. So you need to be able to do both of those things. Our route and a recommendation is always put them into the EU via the Netherlands, and that's why GE has a 3PL fulfillment center in the Netherlands.
Thank you, Ricky.
Yeah, and the one caveat is just everyone just make sure you have a VAT number wherever you're storing goods.
Perfect.
Unless Ricky knows of a workaround to that one.
Yeah, there was actually, for the 14-day challenge, there is a workaround on that, which is something called limited fiscal representation. It's beyond the scope of, and that's why I said at the beginning, there's some certain workarounds to make that happen. But yes, in general, wherever you're going to store your goods, say in a 3PL, you need to be registered for tax in that country, and beyond that, then via some other magic, Amazon will then collect the VAT for you in the other countries around Europe. That's something that's called one-stop shop. Again, all those things will come clear once you get going, but all of that's sorted out by your tax advisor when you get going. So Steve, I hope that answers your question.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. You know, I had a feeling that NL was Netherlands, but you know, I'm sure there's so many acronyms that
there totally are
floating around there. I just, you know, didn't want to mess that one up and get the question wrong for Steve, but I'm glad that we were able to touch on that. And then Andrew has a question. How can I obtain a Spanish EORI number as quickly as taxually advised to wait for German VAT, which is up to another 12 weeks? We are interested in a European responsible person service.
Okay, well,
go for that.
Yeah, sure. Your tax advisor, who looks like it's Taxually, they're a very popular tax advice service in the UK and the EU. You're right. Spain can get you an EORI number relatively quickly, and you can use that against your German VAT number, which conversely, because they're the most bureaucratically complex, takes quite a long time to get. So actually, Andrew, in answer to your question, you can request an EORI number from any country in Europe if you go ahead and ask Taxually to go and make that application for you, and they come in different speeds and things. When I talked earlier on about certain workarounds to be able to get you into Europe within 14 days, that does involve utilizing the fastest country currently to be able to get yourself an EORI number and a VAT number, and certain countries are faster than others. So you can do that. And of course, Andrew, yes, if we could talk at the end, we'd be very pleased to help you with the responsible person service.
Great. Stephen asks another question. What is the market size of Australia compared to the US?
I can jump on that one. So to put in perspective, I will use Canada as a mid go between here. So, the US is the biggest opportunity. Amazon US. If anyone finds another Amazon US where you're going to get those type of sales, please let me know, because everyone is looking for that. Then I would say Canada might be 10-20% of your US sales, depending on your product and competition and a variety of factors. You might see 10-20% of your Canadian sales in Australia. Australia is about half the population of Canada, but the reason the sales are that much lower, I think, is because Australia is still a relatively new marketplace. So it's only been there 4 or 5-ish years. And so eBay still has a lot more market share relative to Amazon compared to, in the US. So I think Australia is still a growing marketplace, but going back to, where you're going to get the best return on your investment of time, Australia is a good one from the standpoint of you don't have to translate listings until you have 75,000 Australian dollars in sales. You don't even have to register for GST there. So there's a lot of advantages to it, but make sure you're in other marketplaces where you can get more bang for your buck as far as potential sales, is my personal opinion, before going into Australia.
Yeah,
Great.
just to add my 2 cents there, and from our experience, what we've actually seen is a lot more Australian-based sellers selling outside of Australia than vice versa, right? And then actually someone on our team was quick on the draw, was able to send me some more statistics for us on this call. So just to kind of add to Kevin's point, Australia's e-commerce revenue is about 31 billion compared to the US, which is about 600 billion. So just to put some numbers around that. Yeah.
Substantial. Yeah. That
Yeah.
difference is quite large.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you guys for asking these questions in the chat. We really appreciate it. And we're happy to answer them. Steve says, thank you that we answered his question. So that's great. Okay, moving on. So we touched for 1 second very quickly on this next slide, but we're going to spend some more time here. And it's understanding the costs of expanding into different markets. Ricky, if you'd like to start here.
Yeah, so the point of this slide here is to consider the in terms of preparation, the right route into Europe, and to take advice on that front. And actually, with some of the questions that have come through from listeners, we actually covered some of these things. But fundamentally, what are the cultural differences in terms of what you're selling, the language barriers that you're going to come across in terms of how you're going to translate your listings that might be more depending on your products, that might be more complex. What type of audience size? I mean, look what we're talking there. The Australian audience is 95% smaller than the US. So, you're not going to be able to expect. You might expect to be able to get better visibility for your product, but the potential reward at the end of that is proportionately smaller. You also might want to think about the technology that's available to sellers in terms of the types of integrations that they might be able to use when it comes to, payment gateways, when it comes to, if it comes to, your own website, the sophistication of different platforms if you're selling off Amazon to the most popular platform in a particular country. We're not exclusively talking about Amazon here. If you want to sell in France, say, you might not just choose Amazon. You might want to choose Cdiscount as well. If you're going to trade in the Netherlands, you might want to choose Amazon, but you also definitely want to sell on BOL.com. These platforms are bigger than Amazon in those countries, significantly in some cases. So you're certainly going to want to add additional platforms, and those you might not be as savvy with. They're not going to be things that are quite as close to home. So once you've got your head around that piece, you've got a bunch of photography and A+ content for your listings in the UK. There's a good chance that you're going to need to replace any unique selling points and bits and pieces like that on your photography, as well as on the listings as well. So, some of those types of things, you also might find that some items in some countries, there are cultural differences in terms of their desirability, in terms of their of how they are accepted by the market, how appropriate they are for the market. which is different to what you would sell at home. The other important thing is the differences in your margin structure. You know, I touched on the big differences of, you know, a completely different set of costs below the line, and very often a difference in costs above the line, because in terms of, you know, shippings and duty, you're going to have different compliance costs. You know, unless you live in California, it's unlikely that you're touching on taxes for packaging and end of life, which you would have with the environmental permitting regulations, for instance. It's unlikely that you've dealt with taxation, sales tax inside the cost. We'll deal with that in the next slide. That you'll need to subscribe to services like the responsible person, that you'll need to subscribe to things like tax compliance. You'll need to have your labels checked. You might need to over-label things. You might need to consider what the hell's going to happen to my goods when I get those things back, as in when those goods are returned. What am I going to do with them? How am I going to grade those? Do I have to put them in the trash? You know, can I resell them? Can I repackage them? These are all the kind of questions that are going to be happening. They're all surmountable, but, you know, just to hark back to the Kevin's slide surrounding the challenges, the most important part is making smart decisions up front to preserve your margins further down, which, let's face it, are only ever going to be being eroded from every angle, especially by your platform itself, but they're only ever being eroded from every different angle. It is feasible to slow out. You know, we talk about this 14-day process, but it is possible to slow this out and do this in a route which is slower and more commensurate with your ready cash to be able to do that. But we're going to talk a lot about funding opportunities later. You can do this a la carte. We don't necessarily, we call the services in our expansion pathway the golden ticket, because the golden ticket to doubling the size of your market. All of those features to say, right, let's do all of those things. Let's grow into the UK and the EU. Let's hit this in one go. Let's go to a new geography. What a lot of sellers do is they'll do this incrementally. They'll start with Canada. They might come to the UK. They'll gradually bolt on pieces quarter by quarter, year by year, month by month, whatever, at their own rate. They'll bolt those pieces on to their business piece by piece, and they'll grow incrementally and slowly. So the final point there on this slide is just, you can do things in an a la carte way, or you can do it in a one-off cost of, right, let's do this in one go. Let's expand to the UK and the EU. It's what a lot of sellers do when they come to GEE, but you can do it incrementally as well.
Perfect. So we mentioned that we would touch on this from a high level. Kevin, if you want to give us some insight here on taxes.
Yeah. So first off, I'm not a tax preparer and don't play one on TV. So everything I'm saying, take a little bit of a grain of salt, but I am a seller myself, and I've lived through this, and I've talked to lots of sellers and helped lots of sellers expand internationally. And this is a topic that I think scares a lot of people away from getting those potential sales. And what ends up happening is people don't really understand that there's really, when you think of it, you just, again, grossly oversimplifying it, but this is more for illustration purposes. You have two buckets of taxes: sales tax and income tax. Sales tax generally goes to the local government, whereas the income tax generally goes to your government. So the taxes on the profits, your income tax, goes to, let's say for me, it goes to Uncle Sam. So I pay the IRS, the US government, based on, you know, the profits I made in Europe, Canada, Australia, wherever else. That's how that works. Now, here's where people sometimes get tripped up. And I've heard this story many, many times from US sellers. They go to their accountant and ask, hey, I want to sell in Europe. Can you help me figure out VAT? I want to sell in Canada. Help me figure out their tax, the GST. And then their accountant, who, you know, has usually a CPA license, has spent all this time figuring out the very complex US tax code, is an expert on the US income tax code, has no idea about these other countries and wants nothing to do with it, and says, that's not my thing. But I have found, if you just say, here's my profit and loss statement, which includes from these other countries, they will help you out with that part. But if you ask them about the sales tax, they don't understand it, but don't let that scare you away. The way I phrase this sometimes is if you went to the eye doctor and they said, hey, which is better, A or B, B or C, trying to figure out the best prescription for your contacts or glasses. And then when you were done, you said, while I'm here, can you help me? My tooth hurts. And they said, I don't do teeth. You wouldn't just live with the toothache, you would go to the dentist. And so just because they're doctors who focus on the head doesn't necessarily mean they do the same thing. And the same thing with accountants. They have their specialties. So go to the eye doctor for the eye doctor, for the dentist for dentistry. So use the same analogy when finding people to help you with the tax part in other countries.
It's also worth noting that the Amazon in particular have some pretty sophisticated schemes once you are tax compliant for looking after your taxes in all the different countries that are being collected, sending the taxes to those countries and giving you a statement and on what that looks like. If you're just selling on Amazon and you're not selling off platforms, Amazon have done a really good job of simplifying that for a fee. But we've talked about those costs
Sure.
being, in your upfront costs. They've done a really good job of, simplifying what that part looks like. And at the end of the day, as Kevin said, you're going to have to get some expert advice. It's not something that you deal with. So once that's there, you can lean and rely on that organization, be that through Amazon's Visa program or through, any other recommendation that you've been put in, to make that happen. But it doesn't need to be as daunting as you might think, in terms of the money that you bring home is your income tax, but the sales tax is what you're selling on the goods that you do. And indeed, if you're selling something for $100 or £100 or €100, that will include, you'll have all of that sorted out on your from the get-go, but that will include the sales tax of that particular country that you're selling in. So what that means is that typically the prices are different between countries based on their inclusive tax.
So to summarize,
Yeah.
we are neither tax experts nor doctors, but the
Sure.
the resources are definitely there, and it's not
Yeah.
as scary as it's probably made out to be.
And I just want to touch on one little example here. And I think it goes back to sometimes also there's a little bit of a difference in language. I was saying, between Florida and other parts of the country, we describe things differently. And sometimes there's different languages used across the pond, so to speak. In America, anything that does with taxes, if we use the word scheme, we think Bernie Madoff, we think we're going to be hauled off in handcuffs, whereas that just means methodology of calculation, basically, in the UK. So always ask the questions, learn at least the language. You don't have to know all the nitty gritty minutia, but just find the people that know what they're talking about and, and get help and learn the basics.
Perfect. So we are running a little tight on time here, but if it's good with you guys, we can extend this a little further.
I'm good.
All of our viewers are still live and kicking with us, so I say we keep it going. So thank you guys so far, and let's move on. Like, how can you be most successful in your international expansion? Leo, I'm going to pick on you for this one.
Yeah, absolutely, and appreciate everyone sticking around. Thanks, guys. I'll make it brief to just not drag this out too much, but and I won't go through each of the specific solutions here. I think the main point is knowing what your options are, right? So once you've gone through the entire process that Ricky and Kevin have outlined for us, so the how, the why, the when, it's from a financial or cash flow standpoint, how are you going to fund that, right? How are you going to support that? So I think it's very important that you align yourselves with the right growth partner, right? That understands what you're looking to achieve. And is there kind of every step of the way to support you on that journey, right? So understanding there's some partners that may only be US based, right? So how is that going to play out in your international expansion? So I think that's an important question always to ask. As Ricky had mentioned earlier, taking a look at being able to receive in local currency from all of these other markets that you're operating in. So making sure that you're aligning yourself with a provider that understands that process, right? And knows where your home base is to be able to manage your cash flow efficiently when it comes to converting all of that back to your home currency. So just to kind of give touch on some of these here, the line of credit is something that makes sense where you think that there's going to be a time delay, let's say, associated with the investment of expanding internationally, right? So you don't need all of the funding to be deployed all at once, right? So it's going to be in stages. So look for some sort of solution that is going to allow you to do that, right? So you can take pieces out at a time, and then as the business grows and is successful, there's proof of concept there. You can draw down additional funds to basically support that, right? Spending more on advertising, spending more in purchasing additional inventory, etc. And being able to access it in the different currencies that you may need, I think, is also very important as you deal with different countries, different regions, and the local currencies that are related to it as well. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just understanding what your options are and making sure that you're aligning yourself with a partner that's going to be able to support you every step of the way.
And just a little bit more on that. I think it's so important, and I make sure to highlight it in all of our webinars, but I will die on this hill. Choosing your partners is ultimately your gasoline, Partners, not to toot our own horns, but partners like Sellers Funding, Maximizing E-commerce, Global E-commerce Experts, these are people who know e-commerce. These are people who live and breathe and eat your businesses, right? These companies know what you need and know how to get you there. So choosing the right partners that know what you do inside and out is not only going to make you more successful, but it's going to make it so much easier. Having the right team makes all of the difference. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I'm passionate about that for sure. So thank you guys. Here are our key takeaways from this webinar. For the sake of time, I'm not going to jump into these. We were all here, but I'll keep this slide up while I say a few other things. Thank you guys very, very much. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I'm glad for those who have stuck around to the end. We have a lot of good information here, but apart from the good information, we couldn't let you walk away without some amazing promotions from us at Sellers Funding, from Maximizing E-commerce, and for Global E-commerce Experts. So Leo, if you want to cover our promo, and Kevin, if you cover Maximizing E-commerce, and Ricky, if you cover GEs, that would be great. Leo, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So specific and special to the audience that's listening here today, the promo that we're offering is to get 3% fixed flat fee for 6 months, or 6% flat fee for 12 months on working capital. Again, this can be used to support your international expansion, right? So have the money, the peace of mind that that you have funds available to support you in that international growth for your business.
Great. Kevin?
Oh, yes. All right. So then, well, first off, I just want to say thank you for having me on this webinar. I hope this is valuable for everybody watching. For anybody going to Prosper, make sure you stop by the Seller Funding booth, as well as Global E-commerce Experts booth. I will be there as well, so come up and say hi to me. But for everybody watching, whether you're watching this and going to Prosper or not, I'm going to send everybody access to the Global Profit class. It's a $97 value. It's going to go into a little bit more depth on a lot of the stuff that I talked about, 3-phase process for selling internationally, why this could be the best thing for your business, and how to overcome some of those pitfalls and challenges that we talked about. So I'll be sending that out probably next week.
Thanks, Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
And Ricky?
Yeah, again, many thanks for having me. I hope everybody listening found this useful. Wanted to reach out, if anyone who was curious to explore the UK and the EU market, to offer anyone who's listening or indeed watching afterwards an account health check, which has a slightly deeper dive into your current business and kind of explores some of the feasibility and of expanding into the UK and the EU, really begins some of that process for you and puts it into a kind of step-by-step guide of, right, do this first, take a look at this, and gives you some indication of your existing sales velocity and how how congested the market might be, what you might be able to expect, and what have you. So we'd love to run a report like that on anybody who is watching, to give you some options and things to make choices through this kind of crucial period of planning 2022. There's an email address there, healthcheckglobalecomexperts.com. If you just drop me and my colleagues a message, we'll get you signed up and started off. There's no cost for this for viewers of this
Great.
webinar.
Thank you guys so much. And for our viewers who amazingly all have still stayed on through all of this incredible information, right? But you know, everybody's time is precious. So we really thank everybody for sticking around through to the very, very end. This is also super important. These are direct lines to all of us here. So if you have any additional questions, if you need a more personalized, hands-on conversation, feel free to screenshot all this information here, add it to your Rolodex. We'll be here. Thank you guys so much. And before I let you all go, there will be a quick survey at the end of this webinar. When you log off, you know, leave us some feedback. Let us know how we did. We hope that you found this valuable. I certainly did. I think the information is great. Great advice. And I hope we can do another webinar with you guys, Kevin and Ricky, sometime soon. I'm dying to hear more about these workarounds. So, Ricky, so thank you guys so much and have a great day. Have a great night, depending on where you are on this beautiful earth. So good night and thank you.
Thank you, guys.
See you, Prosper.
Thank you.
you.
Appreciate it.
That's right. Bye, guys.